So Powell admitted, because he was asked, why are the people still upset about inflation? Because you claim inflation's come way down, but people are still upset. And Powell says, yeah, they are upset and they have a right to be upset, right? He said the reason they're upset is because even though inflation has come down, prices have not. And he admitted that prices today are a lot higher than they were a few years ago. And that is why people are so upset. Where the price of gold is today is considerably higher than it was the last time the Fed cut rates. And the fact that the Fed is cutting rates and the gold price is going up is not a coincidence. Gold is reacting to a Fed that should not be cutting rates. Rates are too low, and the Fed is making them lower. And so the rate cuts are a mistake, and gold is clearly signaling that it's a mistake. Increase in prices. But I'm going to get a little bit more into that because he clarified and made some interesting comments in the Q&A. But before I even get into that, and we're going to take a quick commercial break, but before I get into what was discussed, I want to talk about the one thing that wasn't discussed at all, that never came up once, and which should have come up, and that's the price of gold. $4,000 gold, the fact that gold had shot up so much between FOMC meetings should have been brought up, but wasn't, right? Gold was completely MIA at the Federal Open Market Committee meeting. Now, considering the fact that gold is the main monetary asset, central banks now have more gold than U.S. Treasuries, foreign central banks. You would think that the rise in the price of gold would at least have deserved a question. I think it should have been front and center. I mean, the Fed should have to address that elephant in the room. But no, the topic was never even discussed. And I've mentioned on my podcast that Alan Greenspan, who people call him the maestro, and he's still held in high regard, including by, a lot of members of the Trump administration who speak about him. He specifically said that gold was his barometer of whether or not he got interest rates correct. That even though we weren't on an official gold standard, unofficially we were, because Alan Greenspan still looked towards the price of gold as a market indicator of whether or not rates were too high or too low. And so what he told Congress was $400 gold meant he was too loose, and $300 gold meant he was too tight. And so he was kind of eyeing for around 350. And so if the price of gold stayed around 350, that would indicate to him that he had got interest rates about correct. Well, if $400 gold meant that Greenspan was too loose, what does $4,000 gold mean now? What is that saying about the Powell policy? Clearly, if 400 was represented too loose money back in the 80s, well, then 4,000 certainly must represent the same thing now. And so that's why it should have been brought up. And by the way, my last podcast, I titled it Gold Test $4,000 Support. And some people might think, well, obviously it failed the test because now we're below 4,000, which is the case. We did end up falling below it this week. And in fact, gold closed below 400 today, although it did trade above 4,030 this morning. But it closed below it. As I'm speaking, we're up about $20, but we're still just below 39.50. But also on my last podcast, when I talked about 4,000 support, I did say that it was very likely that gold would go below 4,000 and that 4,000 could be support even if the market was to go below. Because I think it's going to be similar to the way we handled the 3,000 support. It wasn't like 3,000 was some line that we couldn't cross. And the same thing with 4,000. We get below it. But whenever you get below it, you are in a support zone. And just like the market never fell too far below 3,000, I don't expect it to fall too far below 4,000, nor do I expect it to stay below 4,000 for any long period of time, because that would give too many people the opportunity to buy it below 4,000. And I don't think that's going to be the case. So I still think that we're at 4,000 support, even if we're trading at 3,950. I mean, we're close enough to 4,000 to say this is where the support is. Obviously, the resistance now is closer to 4,500 because we did get up to, I think, 4,400, because we got up to like 4,380. So we didn't quite trade 4,400, and then we had the pullback. But even with the pullback, where the price of gold is today is considerably higher than it was the last time the Fed cut rates. And the fact that the Fed is cutting rates and the gold price is going up is not a coincidence. Gold is reacting to a Fed that should not be cutting rates. Rates are too low, and the Fed is making them lower. And so the rate cuts are a mistake, and gold is clearly signaling that it's a mistake. Yet none of these journalists who are invited to ask, Powell questions understand enough about money or economics to ask the question or to point out that gold is flashing a warning, or they don't understand the warnings themselves, right? Because, they have to flunk a test on economics before they could be a journalist, an economics reporter at a lot of these newspapers or television networks. And then, then they get to ask these questions to Jerome Powell. The Fed, Powell is talking about how great everything is. We're in such a great place because the Fed has done such a great job of micromanaging the economy with interest rates and making sure that we have full employment and stable prices. This is all a bunch of BS. On the Fed's watch, our entire industrial economy has disintegrated, and we've outsourced all of these manufacturing jobs, and we've replaced them with these service sector jobs. And we have this gigantic credit bubble, and Powell is completely clueless about any of this, right? We're not even close to being in a good place. Now, let me look at a few other things that they spoke about. Oh, this I thought was really rich. So Powell admitted, because he was asked, why are the people still upset about inflation? Because you claim inflation's come way down, but people are still upset. And Powell says, yeah, they are upset, and they have a right to be upset, right? He said the reason they're upset is because even though inflation has come down, prices have not. And he admitted that prices today are a lot higher than they were a few years ago.